Hey everyone, thanks for coming to my presentation today. I'm excited to share with you the journey that we had at Workfront with all of you. We're going to talk about the situation that we found ourselves in, what we did to address it, and the changes we still intend to make for the future with regards to our release process. My name is Matt Winchester. I'm an SRE manager at Workfront, and this is our story. To start, you need to understand a bit about Workfront, who we are, what we do, and some of the constraints that we're faced with. Workfront is a work management system that serves the enterprise. We do intake, resourcing, delivery, visibility of work all throughout the enterprise. Our customers have come to rely on us for getting their day-to-day work done. Workfront is, like everyone else seems to be these days, a SaaS solution. And unfortunately, despite all the work we've been doing on microservices, we still have a very large monolith. And as I lay things out, you might see how that has impacted the situation we found ourselves in. The other constraint that we have is actually related to our target market, which is the enterprise. For those who haven't worked with enterprise customers, let me explain a little bit what that means. It means that expectations are very high. Change can be very expensive for our customers, and their tolerance to change is typically pretty low. So if you were to tell a Workfront admin, hey, I'm just going to flip on a bunch of features on and off with your user base so I can do some cool experiments, they aren't going to be very cool with that. When we tweak something unannounced, they don't like it. If we churn too much, they don't like it. So when we determined the needs of our customer base was that we needed to have stability, we needed to have predictability, we needed to have good communication and consistency. To solve this, we adopted quarterly releases. Now, a lot of you are thinking, wait, quarterly releases, that's a really backwards thing. I want continuous, I want A/B tests, I want canary rollouts. Quarterly releases, those aren't sexy at all. And the truth is, the way we were doing it, it definitely wasn't sexy. But what I hope to show all of you by the end of this is that it actually can be. But first, let's draw a picture of just how unsexy things were. In order to ensure quality, we ended up having to dedicate 1 month per release to quality. That ended up being about a third of our development time to finding and fixing bugs. Now, spending time finding and fixing bugs is valuable and it's important to do. The problem wasn't necessarily the amount of time we were spending doing it, but more the problem was the crutch that we ended up giving our developers. By centralizing our bug finding and fixing into a 1 month period, it gave developers a free pass to ship buggy code as soon as they were able to get sign off and put off cleaning up things until the time that we were preparing for release. We gave them a crutch and they used it. I'm not sure how many of you used the Git flow branching strategy, but that's actually something that we use too. So we had a confusing branching structure. And on top of that, of course, we changed it and we added our own tweaks on top. The way that we did it is we would have a release branch and it would come off the develop branch once a quarter. I remember trying to get code changes in, and if I didn't make the date that the release was going to be cut, I would have to wait 3 more months before I could get my code in to hit production. It was really frustrating. It was confusing. We spent all sorts of time answering questions about where changes needed to merge. We had conflicts we had to deal with, and it was a pain to train new hires on. Another issue we were facing was that our release and deploy were actually coupled together, and our deploy process was rather lengthy, and it had to be performed during a maintenance window. So this meant that when we were doing our release validation, we would be up in the middle of the night, working until the late hours for hours at a time, and it was really, frankly, a painful process. In fact, we were glad to only have to do it 4 times a year. On top of that, for serving the enterprise and to get some of the certifications that we shoot for, we have a fair amount of change management that we need to adhere to. Now, change management is still a requirement. That hasn't gone away for us. The main problem here was how incredibly manually intensive the process was, and that was something that we wanted to improve on. So given this terrible state we kind of found ourselves in, where we wanted to set out for ourselves a mission to improve things, and what we identified that we wanted to do, we wanted to decouple our release and deploy, we wanted to improve our quality process, and we wanted to automate our change management. So I'm sure as it's a surprise to everyone here, as we set out to decouple release and deploy, Split was a solution we ended up using. Before Split, we had our own homegrown feature toggle system, but it was tied to our monolith, and it wasn't going to work with our microservices. What's more, we never came close to investing the same amount of time and effort in our own tool as Split has done with their product. By working with Split, we were able to get a lot more value than we were able to invest ourselves. As we started decoupling release and deploy, this opened up new possibilities to us. By leaving our development features dark, we could continuously integrate and deploy our code. This means more regular deploys, and releases could become a simple toggle flip. However, this required us to use muscles that had atrophied somewhat. When we were on our old system that was coupled with deploy, sure, we could do feature toggles, but because we were coupled to deploy, there was no reason why we had to. So that meant we got lazy. So if we were going to succeed in a world where we decoupled our release and deploy, we were going to have to build up some of those muscles that we hadn't been using as well for a while. The other half of the equation was switching to a single branch strategy. This reinforced the need to put everything behind a toggle and forced us to use those muscles we got lazy with. It also solved the confusing branching problem. Between the single branch and split, we were able to start driving the behavior we wanted from our teams. Which, if I was to describe that behavior, I would sum it up by 2 rules. The first rule, all user experience changes must be behind a split toggle. Rule number 2, act as though master could be deployed to production at any time. This means good code reviews, this means good testing, and this means not waiting until some month of hardening to ensure that your code is quality. If it's on master, it needs to be gold. In order to support this mentality of master being the gold standard, we implemented a zero defect policy. Any defects that came in during a sprint had to be addressed by the end of the next sprint. High and critical issues had to be addressed in the current sprint. This meant between our sprint cycles and our weekly patches that all issues would be resolved within 3 weeks. We achieved this, by the way, and it frankly amazes me that we were able to do this in just a few months. However, going to a single branch isn't something that you can just do overnight. It takes careful planning, and we had to coincide it with our old legacy release cycle. As an intermediate step, we still kept the idea of a release branch aligned at first, but we changed a few things about it. First, rather than all the changes going to the release branch and then merging down to develop, we changed to committing straight to master, and we would cherry pick our fixes to the release branches. If cherry picking turned out to be too complicated, we just cut a new release branch. We started doing our weekly patches from those release branches. And it turns out what they say about doing small changes more often really does help. And before too long, we were able to drop the release branches and deploy right off of master. Once we deployed to our first environment, we could then promote builds to the rest of our environments. Proper use of toggles helped mitigate a ton of risk to this faster path to production. One of the challenges we faced was with regards to testing. Not unit testing, that's still fairly straightforward, but when it comes to integration and end-to-end tests, we had some problems that we had to figure out. How do we know that all of these features that have been deployed dark would integrate properly when we turn them all on? The last thing we wanted was to turn on all of our toggles at once and then find out that they didn't play nice together. So we implemented something that we call split as code. It's similar to infrastructure as code or configuration as code. We use Split's API to pull all of our production splits as JSON files and store them in a Git repository. We then wrote a CI pipeline around that, which would, whenever we changed those JSON definitions, would automatically deploy to Split and make the changes that we needed in our production Split environment. This turned out to have a number of different benefits for us. The first one was we got clear audit trails. We were able to see who made what change, why, and how. We were able to use a more robust approval tool. In this case, we used GitLab, but other tools like GitHub or Bitbucket would work as well. We were able to plug into our CI process and automatically submit to change management all the changes that we made. And finally, because it was in a pipeline, we were able to write tests for it. So the way that we did this is that we would actually provision an API key solely for this testing. We would create a new environment that was a temporary environment of our product, and we would use this API key on this product. To that split environment, then we would apply these changes. And so we would be running in this temporary instance, we would be running the new feature toggles, and then we could run our entire test suite against it. Now, in order for this to work, you actually also have to change the way that your tests work. Your tests also have to be toggleable. So this means that when your toggle is off, it means that your features are off, obviously, but it also means that your tests don't run. And this is fine, frankly, because if your test is failing but the feature's dark, nobody really cares. We accomplished this with an annotation on our test that specified what split and what treatment was expected for that test to be able to run. And of course, when the toggle was on, that means the feature's on and that the test runs. And then it had better pass, especially if you wanted to be able to merge those changes. And suddenly the tests become live and they can tell us if we have any problems with our integration. Another advantage of this approach was that we realized we could organize our toggles a lot better. The first go around, we turned on all of our toggles individually. This worked okay, but it was still tedious. So the next release, we introduced a master split. It had all of the toggles of a given release depend on that split. If the split was on, then the feature needed to be on. If the master release toggle was off, then all the features needed to be off. It provided one central place to control the entire release. Once we had this central toggle, we got to thinking, we have a number of test customers. Those are instances of our product that we run in production that have the production code and production infrastructure, but customers never see them. We realized that we could create a segment and split and turn on the full release for just those instances ahead of release. This meant we could test every feature of the release on the actual code that was running in production on actual production infrastructure with zero risk to our customers. And if we could do that, there's no reason why we couldn't do this up to a full week ahead of time, since that's how often we deployed our code anyway. Teams could now plan their release validation work and do it during their work hours. Late night release ceremonies were gone. So in review, we introduced split. We moved to a single branch strategy. We implemented split as code, and we created a master release toggle. What this gave us, we were able to do more frequent deploys. We were able to decouple our release and deploy. We were able to do a superior release validation process, automate our change management, and one thing I didn't even really talk about, we added a safety valve for our releases if a feature starts behaving in an unexpected way. Ultimately, if I was to sum it up, what it gave us was a better, more confident release. To demonstrate this, I'm going to show you a screenshot from our release Slack channel that was posted by one of our release managers. If you look at the screenshot, you'll notice that the first comment comes at 8:01 p.m. and he says that he's going to be turning on the release toggles. And 3 minutes later at 8:04, he says toggles are on and everything is done. And that's how we release now. I can't tell you what a big moment this was for us and what an amazing capstone this was to a year of working on revolutionizing the way that Workfront does releases. What's also kind of funny on top of this is while that says, yeah, we did it in about 3 minutes, the truth was it was actually done in about 30 seconds. And he padded the time just because he was worried that people wouldn't believe him if he said it was done in just 30 seconds. So it's great that everything works smoothly internally, but how did our customers react to this? Well, for that, I'll direct you to our VP of Customer Support. He said, normally we see spikes in our support cases, issues, and questions that range from a 20 to 40% increase in volume during the week we release the code and the week afterwards. But the 21.1 release has been quiet. Our support case volume has been flat for the past 5 days, and we have not declared any incidents, and things have been smooth. Great work by our engineering team with a smooth release. So what's next for us? For one, we still have a lot of work to do to improve our deployments. There's a lot of room for automation there, and we can speed things up. We're also going to utilize our ability to control the release to consolidate some of our environments. We actually have some environments that's entire purpose is to have a copy of production data, but to be running the next release's features so customers can test them out ahead of time. But with this new capability, maybe we don't need to have that be its own environment. Maybe we can find a way to do all of that in production just using feature toggles. Also, we want to be able to introduce all of this automation that we added for our production toggles to our preview process as well, that allows our customers to, again, see the upcoming release before it releases. But finally, we don't really know exactly. The fact is that using Split has opened up new possibilities to us, and likely the next problem, we don't completely know what it is, And the new possibilities that have been afforded to us, we haven't discovered yet. So we expect that there'll be lots more interesting things to come. Thank you for your time, and we hope you found this useful.